Welcome to Critical Conditions, the Mind of Nature. And I think we'll start by introducing ourselves.
Let me start. I'm Ursula Biemann. I'm an artist based here in Switzerland, a video essayist, author also. And I'm very happy to be here and start a conversation with you all.
Yes, guys, let's all introduce ourselves. It's fine.
Okay, yeah. I'll go. My name is Aruna. I'm in Bangalore, India. I'm an educator. That's one of my primary roles. And I'm currently on a mental health break for a year. And part of why I'm here is I'm also curious about new topics. And I've had some experience observing indigenous populations, and I'm kind of alarmed by slowly disappearing hold on the vast knowledge that they have in favor of formal learning. So it's very fascinating to see that, that knowledge is potentially being codified into a formal system. So I'm mainly here to listen and learn.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I can go next maybe. Hi everyone, I'm Shrestha, and I'm an industrial designer by profession, and currently I work as strategic designer at a consultancy. So basically my intent of being here is, like, from past 10 years in my design practice, I realized what I have been doing is essentially promoting consumerism, and it is absolutely against what we are trying to do, the conservation. And that was the premise of making people want more things, new things, and dispose the previous one. So it led me to like relook at my entire profession, and I got into bird watching and understanding their design in terms of how well they blend with the nature, etc. And so basically I'm trying to understand from the session that how um, our entire concept of development is based on Western understanding of consumption, and how can we reverse that and yet be creative, yet come up with novel ideas without destroying nature. And Amazon is one of the places which are still our last hopes, and can we replicate that kind of model in India as well and revisit our profession?
Right.
Yeah.
Maybe I can go next. I'm Monika Jaeger. I'm an artist from Switzerland, and I've been working on a video installation called Forest Tales and Emerald Fictions, and I was working in the forests of Singapore, looking at the relationship between forests and cities, and I was really caught by the title of this session of Thinking Forests, because I thought this is really thought-provoking idea of, the forest itself thinking and not thinking about the forest. And so, somehow I had the feeling that there is a completely different approach to what the forest can be. And so I was just really curious to hear and to maybe share some thoughts.
Nice. Well, I can go next. My name is Ivan Vargas. I am from Colombia. I'm actually now in Colombia, my home country. I was trained as a lawyer, but early on I kind of decided that the law, which is such an important tool in society, transformative as well can be, needs to be transformed in different ways. And part of my interest as a legal scholar is to find new ways to, let's say, ecologize law, to make it something that is closer to ecological principles, something that somehow resembles them, which means I'm going to throw a big word there, to rethink the ontology of law, let's say. And I work with indigenous communities and other practitioners in Colombia, in the Amazon, trying to think with them about these issues. So I'm really happy and honored to be here with you and to be with Ursula, sharing this experience that we are both part of. So looking forward to this.
Thanks.
I can go next. Yeah.
Yes, Dharmendra.
Hi everyone. Hi everyone. I'm Dharmendra Prasad, and I'm practicing in the rural context in India. Now I'm based in Bihar, and also I practice in the northeast of India in Assam. And my interest lies in ecology, agriculture, material culture related with agriculture practices, and I'm very much interested in the non-human pedagogical position, how we can conceive the pedagogy of future through the position of non-human and non-living. So that's why like this whole title of the Thinking Forest got me like very stuck, and the process of like thinking about this idea of the indigenous university. So I feel like I never heard it. So I thought like it would be really interesting, because I'm also very much interested in the practice as pedagogy. So I think that it is going to really like help me, and I'm looking forward for it. Thank you so much.
Fabulous. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Dharmendra.
Ursula, I guess you can start by like telling us about the forest that everyone's here for to hear about, and then we can continue the conversation around that.
Oh, can you introduce yourself?
Oh, sorry. Okay, yeah, sure. Since I was the moderator, I thought I could escape it. So I'm Dia, and I have a similar background as Shrestha's. We come from a commercial design space, and I do visual art, and I explore a lot around nature a lot. And of course, I have a fascination for it. And I think I think about the Amazon, it's probably the most fascinating forest on this planet with Congo, etc. But I am really interested in knowing, from my side at least, about how dangerous this process is, because I know that in the Amazon forest, like how the activists have to deal with the protection of the forest, etc. And how do you manage that, or how does the country manage, or the activists or the people who are in this in the process of protecting these forests, how they deal with it?
Well, I got very interested in forests actually through a video project that investigated somehow the pressure that is exerted on the Amazonian forest in Ecuador, and how the indigenous people, activists, are struggling to keep their territories alive and intact. And during this trip to Ecuador, it struck me about the knowledge production of the indigenous people and why this is not really recognized in our Western way of thinking. It's always just exported as some kind of curiosity, as some kind of cultural, ethnic curiosity that we could look at through the anthropological eye. But really at this moment, it becomes so important to recognize the knowledge that they have that can actually save these forests. And I started to invent kind of a figure, the indigenous scientist, as someone who activates this kind of knowledge and the territory as a thinking entity. And that's how I got into this project of the Indigenous University on a field trip in Colombia. And so it's an evolution out of an older interest that I've had on the indigenous knowledge production and education, because in Colombia, of course, education and knowledge are two things that are really part of the colonial project. They're not just formalized, they're extremely compressed into kind of a university model that is a Western thinking type of construct. So all of these things come together somehow in this project of the university, and that's why it is an absolutely mind-boggling project for me that allows us to think on so many different levels, right? And And that's how Ivan and I got involved in this, really, by being approached by the indigenous people themselves who had the plan to develop a university, but didn't quite know how to go about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and there is something that Monika mentioned about this idea of thinking forest, and that is exactly that's kind of a point of departure for the way we approach this project. We can look at forests as a bunch of trees, something that you have this kind of, let's say, external eye and an external experience of something that is outside of you, and that is a forest. And then we think about the forest as this pretty biodiverse, largely unknown kind of collection of entities, but we don't think as part of it. We don't think as co-emerging with it. And we don't think of the forest as something that can think, because we are so caught up with this idea of representing and language as the only way of approaching life and approaching knowledge. And I think indigenous peoples are perfect examples of their practices of how to think with the forest. And part of the ambition of this project is to find ways to learn how to think with it. And that's an important premise of this conversation, I think. So I hope we can also try to think together about this idea. And in terms of the university, exactly. I think Ursula was talking about this earlier, and I think there are different ways of thinking about education as well. And indigenous people in Colombia, particularly the Inga people, are engaging in this co-creation of a different way of thinking about education as well, that is connected to this idea of the forest thinking self, although they conceptualize this differently, of course. But it's also another way of trying to put together different ways of thinking about knowledge. So indigenous practices are part of it, but also science. So this university project is also about how to connect these two things, how to put in conversation scientific practices and also indigenous ways of thinking about life. And this is just, we are just starting to develop this initiative with the communities, and yeah, well, kind of in the verge of really rich conversations.
I just wanted to ask, so, by university, you mean, for example, we have existing syllabi and, subjects that all schools study, and it's like a standard for everyone. Everyone follows the same books, the same history, the same science, mathematics. It's very basic and it's all over. Everyone follows. But you guys are trying to incorporate both of that. You're trying to take indigenous information, like stuff that they learn from nature, and modern science as well. Or how are you building this syllabus, this education curriculum for them?
Well, in Colombia, you have the possibility of building indigenous autonomous universities, because it's a state that has like 84 different ethnic groups, people with their own languages. Is a very, very pluricultural nation. And so there's the possibility of developing your own way of thinking. You don't have to adhere to these syllabus, as you call them, these same school books. So that's the challenge now. It is a bit of a prototype that we're developing, more or less, and that is actually our common shared research that we will be conducting over the next 3 years, right? To figure out how the knowledge, first of all, what knowledge is worthwhile producing, what knowledge is relevant for a life in the territories, which is not at all a question that the universities in the cities would take into consideration. So they educate young people, they give them an educational baggage that is fairly useless once they get back to the territory. So that is a problem that we need to overcome. And so what is the knowledge that needs producing? That will have to be assessed through a kind of a survey that we start to make. What are the needs in the different areas and what does that mean in terms of an educational program that we can set up. And then there are 100 other ways of thinking about it, because knowledge is not produced in classrooms, knowledge is produced in the territory. We learn with and through the territory. So it's a completely different, it's not just a little bit of a different culture, it's really landing on a different planet. You have to rethink all these different ingredients that go into creating an institutional, a kind of an educational institution of that, on that level, right? It's not for kids only, it's really for the entire population.
Yeah, perhaps we can also talk a little bit about the context of this place as a way to understand why the university kind of became a logical step in a long-lasting struggle for autonomy in this area. So I'm talking about a very complex area in the southwest of Colombia. And well, as you know, Colombia is undergoing the implementation of a newly signed peace agreement, well, let's say 2 years ago, 3 years ago, and has been meeting a lot of difficult challenges to implement this peace agreement. So this territory is laden with violence. That's very important, and the indigenous communities are in the midst of that. And also we have this constitution that grants rights to these communities and understands and recognizes their autonomy. So as part of this idea of dwelling in this territory in the midst of extractive projects, Shrestha was talking about development, and kind of they need to develop a different way of dwelling there and create all these different alliances with national actors and international actors to leverage this project that is not only about education, it is about inhabiting a place. It is about connecting things that are not connected because of violence, because of extractivism. And so education, it's a very important component of that, because it's a transformative tool for that purpose, to assert indigenous collective rights in these territories. And this is and I want to emphasize, this is a co-production project. This is something about different actors coming together to create this long-lasting initiative because of the initiative of the indigenous people creating these alliances. And we are part of this co-production. So this is not our project. This is something that we are part of, and that is led by the indigenous communities themselves. And of course, we're meeting different challenges along the way. This is part of the whole process. A lot of learning opportunities ahead. And we have been thinking about this with other actors for some time now. And Ursula has been a very important leader of these thinking conversations. And we can talk about different aspects of the project and the complexity of it. But I just want to emphasize these 2 points. So this is something that is happening in southern Colombia in the midst of a lot of difficult, challenging problems. And this project is about education, but it's more than that. It is also about learning to strengthen the autonomy and the cultural autonomy of these communities, and asserting their ways of thinking, their ways of doing, and exactly against development. That's something, this is a post-development project, if you will, in that sense. Just to give you a little bit of a context.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
I was maybe, can you tell us a bit about the fact that, you know, you're sort of building an institution, right? And you call it university. Is that, can you maybe talk a little bit about this, you know, why you choose this matrix maybe of calling this organization or this learning structure, why you call it a university?
Of course. I just wanted to make sure, because I see myself frozen. Are you seeing? Yeah. Okay. I thought I was crazy and just okay.
I'm sorry, you are frozen.
so I think this is kind of a, let's see if I can froze myself. So I'm going to just shut my video and
Yes,
then
yes,
put it
yes,
on
yes.
again.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so I think I have to go to settings. This is to be a specter, right? Like this kind of technical difficulties. I'm sorry that hopefully this is not too disturbing. Okay, video settings.
Well,
Okay.
maybe I just say a couple of words. I mean, this is while you were setting your image up again. The indigenous leader of the Inga people had asked me to help them with creating a university. And I immediately asked him what he meant, because in Spanish, you also speak of university as the totality of knowledge. It's not necessarily an institution immediately. So I asked him if he thinks of, if he wants an institution or if he speaks about the knowledge itself. And he said, no, we want an institution. And I think, Ivana, you're still with us?
Yeah, I'm still with you. I'm just trying to figure out, you know what, I'm going to leave the room for a minute and then just go back in to see if I can.
All right.
Okay. All right, thank you. Sorry for this.
See you. It is not clear if we may use the term university in the end, because we need to apply for a license with the ministry, and they have set ideas of what it means to be a university. But for now, in this whole development stage, we call it university, and I think has to do with wanting to be also on par with other institutions of higher education in the country, and it's, you know, it's for us it's a symbol right now, not so much the aim to turn into a university the way we think about it. But maybe it's also a way of challenging the notion of university in a big way. Because we are also documenting this whole process of becoming university and make this whole process very transparent to the outside world and to other indigenous people in Colombia. So, you know, if you're successful with the project, I think there's a chance that others will want to do the same. So, yeah, I mean, there is already an indigenous university set up in Colombia, but has a different political history. It has a different, it's a different model altogether. But I think university is in crisis. You know, the university is in crisis. It produces a lot of knowledge that is killing, is not producing knowledge for life. So we want to challenge that somehow too, you know? Yeah.
Yeah,
So basically,
if I may. Go ahead.
Sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, I had a follow-up thing on what Ursula just said. So in my observation, what I've been seeing in India is this dichotomy of people who are indigenous aspiring to be urban people, and there are some who are trying to protect their actually opposite groups. So in your experience, for indigenous universities to be there functional, people should value the natural environment and the indigenous knowledge that they have, which in India especially is depleting at a very fast pace because we can't find value in what we had. And it is somewhat related to, okay, Britishers ruling us for some time, etc., etc. But still aspiration is to replicate America or Europe. So what is, in your experience, what aspires them to protect indigenous knowledge and what doesn't? Like, what is your experience around that?
Yeah, well, perhaps I can jump in. I want to go a little bit earlier to the discussion about why university, why this idea of the university, and I think it happens with many other words. I mean, you have a word is a placeholder, and it's just through practice and conversation that you develop the content. So the kind of university that we are trying to co-create is not a kind of Western university in that sense. It's not an institution to recreate colonial practices. It's not an institution to endorse development practices. It's not an institution to create, degrees that way. It's the content that we want to develop in conversation with different actors and following the orientation of indigenous communities of the Inga people is to create something that is grounded in the practices of this community. So that means rethinking what knowledge means, what knowledge production look like, what is the connection between knowledge and politics, for example? What is the connection between producing knowledge and life practices? What is it for? And that we had a long conversation of last year with different actors in the community. And one of the first questions was, why university precisely? Why don't we call it differently? And what is the politics of it? What is the politics of naming this a university? And there is certainly a politics and a reality. And the indigenous communities in Colombia, over 100 communities exist also in relation to different pressures, but also in relation to the state. So having a university also plays a political role in that way. It means that it's also a way to converse with the state, because we are also trying to make this an institution that way, but with the content that is developed by indigenous themselves. So it's, in a way, we're trying to play this double bind thing of developing an institution, say, yes, that is legible to the state eye, but actually giving the content that the communities want to give, and with the support of different actors. And I think that is a smart move, but of course, it's not a university in the Western sense. It's more than that. It's much more. And the meetings that we had last year to start this conversation was precisely about what is that. Also, beginning by the fact that for many of these communities, there is not one thing as a world or a one reality. So there is not a university that will describe what that reality looks like. For them, there are plural realities that knowledge cannot approach, and there is something that we can do. There is so much that we can do. So this is a really long conversation, but I just wanted to be very precise about the importance of the complexity of the word university in that context. Yeah.
Yeah, if I might jump in and add to what Shrestha said, I think perhaps one reason why there is such a tenuous hold on indigenous knowledge and the preservation of such knowledge is, indigenous people very readily and thoughtlessly being displaced because of industrial projects. There are several examples in India, and I'm sure, all over the world, on how just conforming to a very Western notion of development perhaps might also be influenced by the fact that any hold that one might have on indigenous knowledge is slipping away. So, industrial projects promise jobs, but they're taking away forests from people who know those forests and who know those spaces very intimately. And just a couple of examples of initiatives that I've come upon here in southern India. The state I live in, 5 years ago, I went on a scoping visit before designing an educational program to this nonprofit in a small city 3 hours away from where I live. And then I went into the indigenous territory, got an opportunity to visit a school that the nonprofit had built. And it was a very interesting design because, the observation is indigenous children don't like sitting in conventional classrooms with doors and windows. So they did have conventional classrooms, but they also had these, gazebos with no walls, and that's where the children had classes. And I was chatting with the teachers, and they said, you know, it's very hard to say when the children will show up for class, because they'll wake up in the morning and they won't feel like going to school. And the parents will say, yeah, you don't feel like going to school, don't go to school, right? And when the teachers would go visit them in their homes and they would ask the parents, hey, you know, there needs to be some continuity. And the parents would say, no, today they don't feel like going to school. They feel like going into the forest and taking a walk. And I'm not going to tell them otherwise, right? So these children wouldn't fit into the conventional mold, but I saw a couple of examples where one 14 or 15-year-old had wired the entire computer lab, you know, without learning how to do it formally. And a group of people, you know, started like a mock business where they were selling food. So it's very hard, and it's unfair to cast people, as you all rightly said, into this mold of a colonial education when there's so much richness in the existing structure that the indigenous communities bring, you know, this intimacy with nature, this you know, this mindset that you're communing with something that's larger than yourself, and you're not being confined to a closed space, but you're really learning from the natural environment.
Yeah, and I think that's where there is a real fundamental difference in the idea about knowledge production in the West as something that is detached from yourself, that can be abstracted, that is outside of yourself, that can be learned, transferred, and exchanged in a fairly neutral way. Whereas in the indigenous culture, you don't work with abstraction at all, practically. It's all a kind of place-based, practice-based form of learning, exchanging, and experiencing knowledge. And that's not so much in this disciplined way necessarily. So there is a basic misunderstanding that is created among these different institutions immediately. And to answer Shrestha's question from before, the Inga are known precisely for their huge knowledge about the forest and their botanical knowledge and medicinal plant knowledge. And that is part of the evolution of the forest itself. It's a kind of a biocultural entity that should not be kind of dismantled. And they've realized that they need to make efforts in keeping the plant knowledge they have, and diversify a bit the transmission of that knowledge to the next generation, because so far it's been from father to son, and in a very dangerous conflict-loaded region, this is just not a viable model. They need to find ways of transmitting to a larger number of people, and that's not an easy problem to solve. But we've had also an expert on this in our meeting last year in Mokoa, and he said that it's clear to him that if you don't make efforts now, within 15 years, this knowledge could be gone mostly, you know? And that really shook us all up, and just shows us the urgency of salvaging this knowledge. So the university will also be associated with this project, of course.
So it will also be like this encyclopedia, like this space which will withhold all this indigenous knowledge information. And will it be accessible to everyone?
Some knowledge is suitable for transmitting for everyone and making it public to a world audience. Other knowledge, no. I think it needs to be clarified what knowledge should be kept within the community, but transmitted to a larger number of people, and other knowledge can go public, you know? Yeah.
I thought it's really inspiring when, you know, when I listen to you that you say some things that are taught in sort of urban universities that do not really equip people to go back to the territory. You know, it's sort of the wrong kind of knowledge they have, or the that they would need to thrive and survive as well. And I'm just, it's there is a thought process now sort of starting in my head of, you know, what also urban universities or institutions could learn from this, because, you know, this growing divide between as Shrestha said as well, between the city and the indigenous people, or the city and just the rural, that, you know, people come to the city and they learn, and they're really badly equipped to go back to their home places, you know, to their territory. And yeah, so this is not so much a question, it's more like a thought that I think it's really beautiful to see how the old colonial universities could actually learn from this.
Yeah, if I may, I have, in Colombia, you have the formal universities, they have a quota system to allow indigenous students to come in. So indigenous are in their territories and also in urban settings, because indigeneity is not something that is not just a rural reality, it's also an urban one. But let's say indigenous living in different territories, they go to these big cities and to public or private universities because of this quota system. And then they don't feel encouraged, they don't have the interest to go back to their territories, and they just stay and follow kind of different mestizo you know, pathway. So in a way, having a university also in this formal sense, this institution otherwise, let's say, in the territories will be amenable for to create a space for them to stay in the territory, to get the training that they need, that is pertinent for the kind of territory that they live in. And they don't feel the need to go to these cities to study and learn things that they might not be useful for their community, or interesting, or not advance knowledge differently. So in a sense, also the university will be a way to attract indigenous students from that living in their territories, and avoid this kind of diaspora of indigenous ways of thinking to go in different ways. So, but I think, yeah, I think the modern university, let's call it that way, it's kind of based on this rift, this premise of separation between what you are learning, which might be amenable to particular, you know, systems, and the kind of life experience that you have, starting with your body and your territory and your relationships. And in a way, this university is a way to make this relation materialized. So having a university that is dispersed, because it's not going to be just an institution, a building of sorts, is going to be dispersed, and there are some architecture aspects that this project is also paying attention to, different models to spatially think these ideas of relationality, let's say. And that's true with other aspects of the university project. How can we make the university also a way of experiencing this connection, this relationship between body, experience, territory, in a continuity, not something that is just division. So, and that will that will give you the pertinence and the kind of knowledge that you need. So then there are certain kind of important areas that are part of this. Some have to do with traditional plant knowledge, as Ursula was saying, and healing practices, so medicine. And others have to do with territorial governance. Others have to do with language. So all these areas are geared to strengthening the Inga to start with, and then expanding to other communities. Ways of achieving autonomy in the country in the midst of all these complexities of extractivism, globalization, and all that. And I wanted to make a second comment, and has to do with how we're thinking about indigeneity, because indigenous are also living in urban settings, and they are enacting indigeneity and this idea differently. So in a way, this university will also have to dialogue with science, with development, with other things, as not to cast indigenous in a particular, confined set of practices that we consider are indigenous. So that they are the ones who define what it means. They are the ones to give the content. And in my case, it's kind of I see myself as trying to first learn about this, what it means also for me personally, and also how I can support the creation of this autonomy. Sorry for the long rant.
Yeah, well, one of the things this university can cultivate is strengthen and highlight and maybe elaborate more on is the relationship the Inga people have with the natural world, and that is something that is their relationship to the forest, to all the living entities, and how they are in kind of an interspecies communication with these entities is very fundamentally challenging the scientific notions of how we can think about the forest as a biological or at best ecological relational thing. And that is something that I think there's so much more work that needs to be done in this area, because we just start to understand how reason has been so much the focus on anything that creates reality. And the indigenous cosmology speaks of a very different way of thinking about reality, where life is at the center of how they think it. So from there unfolds a whole different set, of philosophical assumptions, and that's what we would like to investigate further also and experience, because it's we're learning actually basically from them. So. But I think this could benefit so many others as well.
So Ursula, we have some questions for both of you, Vivan and Ursula. And I'll just start with the first question. Will your experience in creating the Indigenous University be open source?
Yes. In fact, we're creating an online platform right now called Devenir Universidad, Becoming University, which accompanies this process of developing the university through the interaction of all these different partners and persons and people, and that is gathering all the materials that we produce during the conferences in video. The video recordings of the conferences and the designs and architectural designs that we produce together with students, and the reports and all the text that we will be producing will be online, mostly for everyone to consult. And I hope that it will be good material for lots of people around the world for research, purposes as well.
Yeah, and the second question is, can these ideas be transformed? Transferred across geographies? I know that even though different indigenous groups have, are complicated and different from each other, but is it possible to do that? Like, is it applicable?
Go for it, Ivan.
But I reckon that Dharmendra, probably you had before. I said like a glimpse of you wanted to say something.
Who? Ursula?
Before, no, I said Dharmendra. I think he wanted to say something.
Oh,
But probably
Dharmendra,
was
do you
my
want to say
imagination.
something? Dharmendra, do you want to say something? He hasn't said anything. Your mic is off. Your mic is off. Yeah.
So like this is like so inspirational for me. And really want to like know each and every detail of this whole process of like how this is like developing, you know. So for me, like, because I live in a village and like so many problems are here, like this society has like slowly becoming its psyche becoming so that it stopped thinking ecologically. So in that sense, earlier knowledge systems are like slowly getting disappears. Like for example, in the practice of agriculture, we have so much technological introduction that we are almost on the verge of like losing the whole bodily engagement and production of gestures that happened around agriculture. And that is basically, I feel, also a very sad thing, which is like, and also the government policies, basically what are their roles? Their roles are just to like develop the whole landscape. And that is somehow like, you know, creating a bigger challenge to basically look around this material cultures and the indigenous knowledge systems and try to, you know, bring back those in the life. So for me, this is also a very, really big challenge here, locating myself in India, in a village, and thinking about all these things. So really, this is so much inspirational, and I think that maybe I think we can talk longer, and maybe I will learn a lot from your experience, Ursula and Ifan.
It's great to hear
so
that.
much. Thank you.
Well, I think it's an issue of representation as well, because these rural practices, indigenous practices of how to cultivate land and the forests and take care of things is not something that is registered on a state level. On the state level, your area will be represented as an empty zone where no development is happening, you know? And it needs to be made more productive in the mind of the state by, you know, investing or by developing in these areas in the minds, in the ideas of the state. And that's why I think it's really important to make this university, for instance, super public, by visual representation, by new media, by video works, by online platforms, by exhibitions, by being ultra communicative about this project, because it's a way of occupying this land and its practices in front of the state, you know? So I would highly encourage you to make a blog, post your practices, share the practices. There is nothing more important than that, to make it present in this kind of digital landscape, you know?
Yeah, and I think there is also, going back to your question, Shrestha, about this university and the reproduction of the question about the transferring this initiative to other landscape, right? To
Yes,
other
yes. It's basically, how do you, is this something that there are lots of indigenous communities everywhere, and I'm sure like everyone is discussing, the knowledge is disappearing because there's progress happening, development happening. So is it applicable to, is it something that can, you know, trespass geographies, or is it very focused on Brazil itself, sorry, the Amazon itself?
Yeah, so, well, just a couple of comments about this. I think there are some commonalities in terms of the, I want to use this word, decolonial orientation of this initiative. You know, it's we don't want this to become, again, an instrument to reproduce the same logics that are putting us in kind of in the landscape of development. let's say, and extractivism, and all its different ways in which it occupies territories and minds, you know. So there are certain principles that are common to these kinds of initiatives, and indigenous universities in Latin America are happening now. This is not something new. It's happening in Mexico, it's happening in Costa Rica, it's happening in Brazil, it's happening in Ecuador, and it's happening in Colombia and many other places. And I think it's part of this big hemispheric and even, let's say, global trend to decolonize thought. But of course, the content and the way it is enacted in particular territories have to consult first the territory where these practices are happening, and the knowledge that is there, that is built there in conversation. So in that sense, it's also place-based. The university is place-based. It can be global. It can be, communicative in many of its principles. Joining this effort to decolonize institutions, the institution of education as a social institution, let's say, but it's very particular, it's very place-based, and it's part of a political project of survival and revitalization of practices like the ones you were mentioning, Aruna and Dharmendra, recovering different knowledge systems regarding agriculture, learning in the forest instead of learning between walls, making the classroom bigger, making the classroom the forest, and this is it. It's not that this is new. It's something that is ongoing. It has been ongoing for a long time, and we're just kind of making this, supporting, making this more visible that way, and also contributing a little bit to that learning process. And this tejido, which is the word that they use quite a bit, no, Ursula? Tejido, which is weaving. Weaving the university. So this weaving is very important. Like this, for example, these kinds of things. Weaving, these kinds of things. That's part of this,
And one last question we have is, have you faced any troubles from local communities and governments while trying to set up this university?
So I didn't understand the beginning of the question.
Did you face any trouble while building this, while you're setting this university up, from local communities and the government? Kind of trouble, like did they bother you? Did they try and stop your project or?
Not yet. But we will, no doubt, we will. But it is meant also as a peace project, as a peace building project, allowing all other communities of the region to join the university if they want, because there isn't any institution of higher education there. So it is a novelty in the region, and it might be welcome also for colonial settlers in rural areas or other indigenous tribes or Afro-descendants who live there. So it tries to appease a little bit the tensions in the region, if anything.
So guys, we have like 6 more minutes left, but we're kind of officially done with the session. But if you guys want, we can add one more question maybe for the next 5 minutes.
Yeah, I wanted to say something about the so the peace building aspect of this university, and I think it's very critical, because this is happening because, I mean, this is happening in a place that is trying to reconcile different actors of society, because we have long-lasting, war in Colombia between 2 different sectors, and that created a lot of displacement, a lot of killing, and a big need for reconciliation. So in a sense, I think this university is also part of that process. It's the indigenous contribution to the reconciliation process, perhaps, or it could become that, because it is about how we can come together in a place, and instead of being only the victims of targeted violence against us, this is a response to that kind of thing, in a way. So it's making peace not only with the other, the neighbor, being the indigenous neighbor, or the colonial settler, or the campesino, or the Afro-Colombian, it is also making peace with the territory, because the territory is also, I mean, it's asking us to make peace with it, because we are part of it, let's say, you know. So in a sense, the university is also has that orientation, in my view. And this is an evolving process, and of course, we're going to meet a lot of obstacles, but that's part of the challenge.
That's great.
Maybe you want to say one word about what territory is for the indigenous.
Yes, yeah, of course. I mean, yes. Well, this is a very important question, because as Ursula mentioned, territory is not something that is outside. It's not something that is outside of yourself. It's not something that is outside of culture. Territory is not dead, it's living. It's agential in a sense. It does things. It has rights. We have actually, this is a very important aspect of it. This evolving movement of the rights of nature in our country is also, we're joining that. And the state is granting rights to the Amazon, to different rivers. And actually there is a system in the judiciary that is recognizing the territory as a victim of violence, which is a very important legal innovation. And that implies that the territory is not something where culture takes place. It's not something that happens to be a bunch of trees and plants. It's something that we create through relations over time. And because of that, that thick relationality that exists, it is living. And it has been living for a long time. And we're just reckoning with that living character of the territory. So for indigenous communities, there are different ways of thinking about territory. You have, a lot of variation, a lot of names for territories. But if I may, there is this common idea of the territory as being a living one, not resources where you can extract from to fit into economies,
It's a living entity, and it's a cognitive entity, to end our session on the forest as mind, no?